Hello, I'm actually one of the founding members of the group, which were three of us initially met in a pub in Cumbria after the last Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust conference in 2019. I started out my career as a forester in the commercial sector, and from there I moved into environmental management and sustainability. I've been asked to provide a brief summary of other plastic within forestry, and I'll be drawing from this guidance, which is now published and which we've been working on within the Forest Plastic Group, collaborating together. So it's not all about the tubes. Tilhill is one of the largest commercial forestry management companies in the UK. Last year we planted around 15 million trees, but less than 10% of the trees that we planted were actually in tubes or shelters. So it's not all about the tubes. And we need to look for the alternatives across the value chain of plastic products produced and used in forestry and woodlands. So this diagram here is taken from a call for action, an assessment of agricultural plastics and their sustainability, and it sort of shows the inputs, the plastic use, and the waste, the outputs coming from it. So really, right through from nursery propagation, delivery of plants to woodland creation sites, planting and establishment, forestry management, harvesting, and then distribution of products from forestry and woodlands. So that's not very easy to read, so here's my simplified version. So what other plastics have we got within forestry and woodland management? Well, we've got young trees and saplings arriving to site in plastic tree bags. We've got tubes and stakes arriving to site wrapped in plastic film with plastic straps. We've got hazard tape. We use hazard tape to create no-go zone areas. And following being told that there was no hazard tape up for a buffer zone and it being seen a bit later up in a squirrel dray, I Googled that picture. We've got signage, both temporary and permanent, usually made from plastic. We've got PPE, first aid, spill kits, all coming with plastic. We've got barriers, temporary fencing, silk netting, geotextiles containing plastic. And then on all forestry sites, we've got containers, oil, lubricant, always found in forestry operations containing plastic. And finally, timber processing and distribution, plastic wrap and packing straps. So plastic is commonplace in forestry and woodland management. And just to put it into perspective, Winnie mentioned some figures earlier about forestry and plastic. Agriculture, including forestry, value chains used 12.5 million tonnes of plastic products in 2019. And of this, crop production and livestock used 10 million. Forestry used 200,000 tonnes. But why should we look to reduce plastic use within forestry? Well, there's been recent research by the UN Environment Programme which suggests that agricultural soils may actually receive a greater quantity of microplastics than oceans each year. So it's very significant. So just to focus on a few of those areas of other plastics, tree bags. Tilhill manages around 80 tonnes of plastic shelter guards each year as plastic waste. But we also deal with around 15 tonnes of tree bags. And for me, tree bags are truly a single-use plastic in forestry and not an insignificant problem. Often the trees arrive in these tree bags pre-treated with pesticide, so the empty bags will contain residual pesticides. Within Tilhill, we managed to recycle around 40% of the bags, and they often end up as garden furniture, chicken coops, pigsties. But there's often great logistical challenges of getting bags from remote rural areas down to offices, onto recycling companies, and transporting them a significant distance actually is going to have a very significant carbon footprint associated with it, and it might not be the most sustainable solution. So the remainder will go for energy recovery. So what are the alternatives? Well, within the plastic group, We've been looking at a lot of different options, and just to point out, that bottom slide there shows all the empty plastic bags from one of our districts at one of our offices at the end of the planting season, so you can sort of see the scale of it there. So there's cardboard boxes, wax-coated paper bags, Hessian sacks might be alternatives for the traditional black and white plastic bag. However, some of these options will have a significant carbon footprint associated with them, greater than the traditional bag. We've got chiller trailers. We've tried chiller trays as racking systems with reusable boxes. But again, actually for us, the issue is the transportation around the site. Some of the scale of the restocking that we're doing in major woodland creation schemes along an entire side of a hillside actually means that the bags and the trees need to be dropped off for the planting team around that planting site. And the easiest way to do that is within those bags on the back of a quad bike or in a trailer. We have been looking within Tilhill. We're doing some plastic-free trials. Mailer Nurseries is part of the BSW group, as are Tilhill. We've been collaborating with them, looking at using cardboard boxes in 2010, 2021. The photo to the left there is our internal Plastic and Waste Champions group, and the look on their faces when I produce what they think is a cake box. But that's the type of box we've been using for trialling out distribution of young saplings. We've had mixed results. They were actually really good for handling when they arrived at site, storage and stacking, but again, it's really bad for distribution on site and getting them up the hillside and then lasting when they're up there for the planting teams. So this year we have been looking at using bioplastic. We are at really early stages of trialling that, working with a bioplastics company and manufacturer, creating bags which will look like the traditional ones, white on the outside and black on the inside. The challenges have been the reaction in the cold store, but the advantage is they handle and distribute like existing bags. But as has been mentioned earlier, we need more evidence on bioplastics, life cycle analysis, their ecotoxicity. We would be bringing those in and then composting those, but is that going to be more environmentally friendly? So forest signs, fluted polypropylene generally for the temporary ones, but signage and information boards are also made from plastic. There's a range of permanent and temporary signs that we use across forestry. A subgroup of the plastics group has been looking at these and what the options might be, and looking at how easy they are to recycle. I know the National Trust recently collected all their redundant signs and sent those in for recycling, so 100% recycling there. But again, logistics and travel for recycling is another area of a bit of a challenge for us, and we are working together to look at sort of collection hubs to reduce transportation and to work together within the industry. These can be reused, these temporary signs, but I'm an UCWS auditor, and what that means is I audit a variety of forests managed not just by Tilhill, but also a range of other organisations and estates to the UCWS standard. And despite these being easy to reuse and recycle, these temporary signs, I do frequently see them left fallen in the woodland, starting to disappear under vegetation. We've been looking at signage as well in terms of what alternatives to that traditional plastic sign. We're going to move to wood and metal for our permanent signs, and we've been looking at trials with a water repellent card made from FSC certified spruce wood pulp and paper, so a natural wood-based product. Just wanted to mention PPE. There's plastic in all the PPE, not just PPE, but the corporate clothing that we're all wearing, hard hats, clothing, polyester, and of course washing that corporate clothing will result in microplastics going into wastewater and from there into the water environment. We've recently been looking at a new PPE supplier and a corporate clothing supplier who are offering options for sustainable clothing, and then we stumbled into a bit of an issue there in that the more natural clothing, the sustainable range, they didn't actually incorporate a women's fit or maternity clothing within that range, so that was rather frustrating. So in the meantime, in terms of our corporate clothing, we've just gone through a rebranding exercise. So that means all of the old corporate clothing needs to be replaced, and as we do that, it's going to go to a supplier of a zero waste to landfill supplier who is going to be destroying all branded clothing and then recycling it, and it goes into new clothing or geotextiles. And so lots of other plastics, geotextiles I just mentioned, containers, spill kits, and that picture at the top there is the use of geotextiles for a rather extreme example of preventing diffuse pollution. And it did make me wonder when I saw that how much of the geotextiles that we're using alongside watercourses and over log bridges that are starting to deteriorate are resulting in microplastics going into the freshwater environment and soils. So it's just food for thought, really. And back to being an UCWAS auditor, that bottom picture there is an amenity woodland planting scheme of quite a few hectares that was done in the early 2000s using plastic mulch matting. And 20 years on, every single mulch mat was still in place, breaking down into the soil. And that sort of leads me on to sort of legacy plastic, which does come under the heading of other plastic. Today's foresters, we've really inherited a problem, and there are legal requirements to remove this plastic from forests and woodlands. Waste is anything that we discard because it has served its useful purpose. It should be disposed of and not left in situ to pollute. UCWAS, the UCWAS scheme that certifies the wood as sustainable, it requires a redundant material plan for all forests, which will include a plan to remove any waste plastic or tree tubes. When I'm auditing as an UCWAS auditor, I have to look to see that that redundant material plan is in place. What I can see is that the plans to remove it are too far out. There's plastic still in the properties that is starting to biodegrade already. So we have a legacy plastic issue with redundant tubes being left too long on site before removal. And we need to act more promptly to remove these tree tubes. So within Tilhill, we have made a commitment to remove any legacy plastic within our woodlands by 2025, where it's within our control or influence to do this. And as a group, we are looking at how we can collaborate on regional resource hubs and work together to remove legacy plastic. So in summary, it's not just about the tubes. We need to work together to research alternatives to plastic, and it's been really great looking at the presentations this morning where we're doing that. We need to do a full life cycle assessment where we do this to ensure we are reducing the overall environmental impact. And we need a coordinated action for good practice across the industry to facilitate this. Where we continue to use plastic in the short term, we must focus on sustainable use and better waste management technology as well. And it's been really great to be working within the group and working with a variety of people across the industry. And doing that in the group means that we're working together to look for responsible consumption and production and to support the UN Sustainable Development Goal, responsible consumption and production. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. I mean, I think that goes back to what I said at the start. What started off as a simple question of how do you get rid of plastic tree tubes, the more you think about it, the more that question expands. And also Craig's point about how plastic is just so much of all our lives and all our work, isn't it? But Nicola, that's fantastic.